All right, today is June 6, 2018. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes CSI implementation group. Yesterday was code freeze for Kubernetes. I think the big PRs that we wanted to get in, we got in, so that's good news. Let's go down the agenda. First up are PRs that still need attention. So the CSI driver registration stuff all got in. Thank you to Sergey for that. So I think the next steps on the driver registration side are the external driver registrar changes. Sergey, do you have any updates on the external changes?
Yeah, a little bit below there is a PR just for that, like, oh, don't delete the whole thing. Oh, or you copy it somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to move it down, but that's okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This one.
So that pull PR30, so, that's where I kind of started putting it together. I mean, it's working because I used it for testing. The only thing that needs to be there are a couple of things to discuss. First, we need to provide driver registrar needs to pass absolute path to the socket to kubelet on that get info request.
Right.
And so far, since it runs within a container, we provide a relative path.
Mm-hmm.
So it's ugly, but I had to add full path parameter to be able to pass that information to the driver.
Okay.
I don't know how to. I mean, I couldn't come up with the idea how to convert this relative path into the absolute path.
So this is in the driver registrar. Driver registrar doesn't know what the full path is.
Yeah.
I wonder if we can make this a parameter that is set from the pod YAML file.
Pod YAML file.
So the YAML file will contain the mount path, and then whoever is setting that just needs to make sure that they also set the full path correctly. That way, this driver registrar alone doesn't need to figure that out. I mean, we could use this as the default value if one is not specified, but it should be ultimately set by the caller who's executing this, and the caller is going to execute this as a pod. So in the YAML file, they're going to say, I want this socket to exist in this path, and then they just need to specify the parameter to this binary file to say, I want it to, I expect the socket to exist at this full path.
Yeah, but then basically you require a rendering of the YAML file with the because I mean you cannot pass a variable. I mean, at least I don't know how to pass a variable to the YAML definition of the container. Like I could use Helm, for example, to build a chart. There I could define a variable like in values.yaml, and then it would be picked up and used as a parameter for pretty much CSI driver, because it also basically could use it, or for a driver registrar.
Right.
Other than that, the alternative could be
another option that we have is let's imagine we're in the future where we don't have to have two sockets, we only need a single socket. If we get to that point, then we can get rid of all this complexity and go back to the way that we had it, where the partial path was sufficient.
Yeah, that is correct. Yes, because then kubelet will detect the real socket instead of our registration fake socket.
Right, right. So maybe we can say long-term, maybe the proxy is the correct solution. It'll be easier to use rather than having two sockets. But in the short term, if you use the two sockets, we just need to document it very well and say, hey, you need to set these flags correctly, there's two sockets. If you don't set them, bad things are going to happen. I don't know if a better solution than that.
I mean, as long as we document that we need two sockets and people follow the instructions on how to set it
Yeah.
up,
I
it's
think the
not like
challenge here,
anything
Luis,
else.
is that like there are two sockets, and even if you understand that, the trick here is that in addition to that, you need to pass in this flag that says, hey, when this socket is exposed on the host machine, the complete path on the host machine is going to look like this. So that this path is then returned as part of the registration
Oh,
to
I see what you mean.
Kubelet to say, hey, Kubelet, look at this path for your socket.
But that path is dictated by the kubelet going in, right? Is it the register? That's the location where you drop your socket, so the kubelet
Right.
talk to you. So that's dictated by that API on that side.
Yeah. It's just the only ugly thing is that you have to specify it in two different places, right? You have to specify it in your pod YAML file when you say, I want a host path, and the host path is going to have a socket at this path, basically. And then you also need to specify this as a parameter to the driver registrar binary to say, hey, this is where the path for the actual driver is going to show up. So it's just a little ugly.
Yeah.
Can I just play devil's advocate here? How normally, how much gain are we gaining by doing this work? Is it that necessary that we move in this direction? Or I'm only asking, trying to step back and saying, look,
Are you talking about driver registrar registration?
yeah, I'm talking about where satisfying the plugin architecture.
So I think we realized that that is a requirement because of the work that we needed to do to move the node labeling into the kubelet. So in order to move the node labeling into the kubelet, you end up with a chicken and egg problem of you don't know what socket to talk to because you're not getting a request from the user, but the driver already exists and you need to register it. And so there is a problem of I need to be able to register with kubelet that I exist. And so now we have that mechanism. It's just that for backwards compatibility, what we did is do two sockets instead of one socket, because that way your old driver can still drop its socket in the same old location where it was, and you just introduce a new socket for the driver registrar, which manages the registration with kubelet.
But we could, I mean, there's another, I think, even more flexible solution is if we manage to extend the CSI to
Yes.
support that get info,
Yes.
to support it natively, then we don't need any tricky things.
Right.
I think so. I'm just trying to kind of have us rethink this because it looks like the direction we're going. It's almost like too deep. You'll never be able to come back up. So I feel that we maybe need to just rethink the direction. That's what I'm trying to do. Rethink the direction we're going, and maybe try to figure out if there's another way, which is a much cleaner and maintainable solution. I just feel that this may be unmaintainable. Is that right English?
It'll be definitely hard to understand at the very least. So if we go down this path, it needs to be very, very well documented.
Yeah, and that's my concern. But I feel that if we, for example, I know that, for example, in Kubernetes right now, it is alpha, this support. So we don't have to jump to do this now. But if we go the route to say, look, let's get info to give us the information, that will make the implementation much simpler. That I feel that we should try at least doing that direction. If not, we can do this for 1.12.
I think we've already set sail in that direction because that code has already merged in Kubernetes. So now, in order to complete that, we need to make the associated changes with driver registrar, or it's going to be broken.
No,
So
we're still compatible with the old stuff, right?
So the Kubernetes code now has a fork in it. By default, it's the old behavior, and then opt-in alpha behavior is the new driver registrar behavior, registration behavior. So if someone opts into that new driver registration behavior, and we don't have these flags set properly, or we don't have these changes on the driver registrar side, it won't work.
And I feel that's okay. I feel that we can document and say, look, this was set up, and we are still investigating the implementation path. It's out of band anyway. I feel that's okay, because if I just want to make sure that this code right here is just looks to me like we're going. It's not simple to understand, right?
Yes, I agree.
It becomes unmaintainable.
If
So
we can simplify that, let's do that. But I don't think the right answer is to kick the can down the road and handle it later, because we'll end up with incomplete end-to-end functionality in that case. We'll have basically shipped a feature in Kubernetes that we didn't finish on the driver registrar side, and that's a bad place to be as well. So I'm fine taking the time to think through this and reviewing it and making sure we get it right. But I'm not okay with just not doing anything here.
and it is not possible for us to remove that feature. Like, let's say it's not
We
done yet.
could back it out if we have to on the Kubernetes side, but we would need a pretty high bar for it. So I think the push for standardization of Kubernetes registration is coming from other components as well who want to standardize GPU, device plugin, all of that.
Yeah, and I can understand that.
Internally, we also have a need as well, right? Because one of the requirements we have for security is that this code can, the driver registrar code as it's currently written is problematic, basically, from a security perspective, because it's modifying the node object.
Yeah.
So the mandate that we have is get rid of that. The driver registrar sidecar container should not be modifying the node object. And the only thing that can modify the node object is kubelet. And so if kubelet is going to be doing this work to register on behalf of the plugin, it needs a mechanism to do plugin registration.
And I completely agree with all that. I'm just
we have that mechanism in place now. We have the callbacks ready for CSI. So basically on the Kubernetes side, CSI now has a way to discover these sockets as soon as they come up. Now the challenge is kind of finishing the picture end to end. As a driver maintainer, you're going to have a choice. Either you run 2 sockets, and you go through this kind of silliness where you have to pass in the path and maintain the, just keep an eye on those things to make sure you're passing the right thing everywhere. The benefit of this approach is that you don't have to set up a proxy or anything like that. The second option is that you modify the driver registrar to be the only thing that drops a socket. That simplifies the design a lot, because basically you don't have to pass in any weird paths inside the binaries. There's only one socket that's dropped on the machine that's registered with kubelet, and then when kubelet talks to that socket, if those calls are for driver registration, the driver registrar will fulfill them. If they're for the driver itself, the driver registrar will forward them to the driver. That is something that we considered. I think I talked to Sergey and Vlad about that. And while we think it's a nice solution, the problem is it's a lot more work in order to set up basically a proxy, to convert driver registrar into a proxy. And this seemed like a less work to get us there initially, at least. So yeah. I think I'm okay with this as a first step to make sure that we have this functionality working end to end. I don't think it should be the end game. Like, we don't stop here. We need to go either one of 2 ways: either make driver registrar a proxy so that we have a single socket, or what Sergey suggests, or I forget who it was, Sergey or Vlad, somebody suggested that this should be pushed into CSI itself, the registration calls. Yeah. And if we do either of those things, then we collapse back down to a single socket, and then this configuration is still simple.
I think there's a third option where if if there's pushback to getting registration service into CSI itself,
Yeah.
the third option is to have authors of CSI drivers expose that service. But
Right. They can always do that. So, like, for example, Portworx could decide that they want to bundle the registration calls into their driver. That would actually be okay too, because it doesn't break anything. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing is that driver automatically becomes Kubernetes specific if we.
Yeah, but non-Kubernetes calls don't need to call it, right? It just exists. It doesn't break any other. That's actually a decent option. I like that.
Actually, I like that too, because at some point, sometimes, if it's not CSI specific, we're trying to make things simpler for the integration with Kubernetes. You could just say, look, for Kubernetes, you need this call, and it can be added. It can be also a standard, right, for Kubernetes.
So then maybe what we do is over here in the driver registrar have a flag that says enable driver kubelet registration. If that flag is set, then they need to also pass in this full path, and then driver registrar will ensure that it does the registration and it drops a socket and everything. Or if that flag is not enabled, then you go down the path of you expect only a single socket and this registration code should exist in the driver. That way it's up to the plugin owner to decide what they want to do.
All I'm looking for is a maintainable solution. So if that to me is more maintainable, then that's fine with me. I don't mind adding.
I mean, we could go another option, which is if we want to make it just one option, which is let's make it as dead simple as possible. We could just not even have it in the driver registrar at all. We can say that if you're going to implement a Kubernetes driver, you must implement this service as well.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I'm telling you, I would write that, and that would be okay, as long as it's standardized and it's documented.
That would break all the existing drivers, right?
Yes.
Right.
No, it won't break them, because it will go back to the Kubernetes still supports the original model, right?
Yeah, but if some Kubernetes cluster owner basically flips on that feature and says, oh, I want to use this driver registration feature, then any plugin that doesn't have that.
Then that needs to be documented. That if you enable this, then this is what's going to happen. This is still alpha, right? So that's okay.
I think in my heart, I feel bad about having the driver have any kind of Kubernetes specific logic in it. It's kind of the reason why we have these sidecar containers, so these drivers can remain agnostic.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we should leave the option open to the driver if they want to do that, but we should give them the option if they don't want to do it with these sidecar containers.
Yeah, I think eventually we're going to have to come down to a solution that that we dictate, because if we have so many options, then the internal code is just going to be all over the place to be able to handle all these.
The more options you give, the matrix of testing blows up and it becomes very difficult to manage. So we kind of need to decide what it is that we want to do and just dictate that.
Okay. Well, let's have a meeting about that. I mean.
Okay. Yeah, we're not in a rush to solve this. We have until the 1.11 release ships. Maybe Sergey, you can set up a meeting with Luis, Vlad, me, and anybody else who's interested to discuss this further.
The only thing is that since I don't have an account with Zoom, I would appreciate if somebody of you, some of you could set it up.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no problem.
Thanks.
I just normally use the same link number.
Yeah, you could use the same link as this. That'll work fine. But let me check my calendar, and I can set something up after this meeting as well. Okay. Today, does 2 p.m. Pacific time work for you guys today?
That's 5 p.m. for me. A lot of us, actually.
Yeah, I've got a 1 p.m. So how about 1:30 p.m. Pacific? That's 4:30. So 4:30 to 5.
I'm open.
Okay.
I
Vlad.
think I'm open to. I might be. Yeah, just put it down. If I might just be listening on to it. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. I'll throw something on your calendars and we can discuss that later this afternoon.
Okay.
Let's get back to the items at hand. So there's some work remaining for the CSI registration stuff. Sergey's working on that. We'll talk about it later today. Luis, do you want to talk about this repo reorganization?
Yeah, just a quick thing. Not much has changed since last time. Patrick has created nicely a nice repo for it. And he can go to that link right there, and where he has maintained all the Git history. And you can see what it would look like. I just feel like just grabbing this as a starting point and just going from here. But I think this is great. And we got the packages, we got the commands. So so you can see now Flex Adapter, iSCSI, they're gonna go away. Those are the drivers. But he just did a dump.
Hold on. This looks like it's directly under Kubernetes CSI. I thought Kubernetes CSI is the organization, right?
Yes, this is his example of him putting things together. So then
okay.
we will grab this and move it to the Kubernetes CSI repo.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what will be the top directory be called? What's the name?
Sidecar containers or something?
I think it's going to be called Kubernetes CSI / Kubernetes CSI.
Oh no, that's terrible.
No, wait, let me explain. Or some name. What I mean to say is that in it has the Sidecar containers, it has the host path driver, and it has the CSI libraries for that common, like logging and things like that. So it's not just Sidecar containers.
I would like to call it just sidecar containers so that we don't get scope creep. I think if we make it too generic, everybody's going to want to put everything into it. And I want people to think twice before they dump everything into it.
Then I'll just call it sidecars. Is that correct?
I'm okay with sidecars. And then, if you have sidecars plus the host path, at least it's like, oh yeah, host path is an exception here.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, that's good enough for me.
Okay.
That's it. So yeah, that's what it'll be called.
Thank you for that update. That looks good to me.
Yeah, I'll just set up a meeting with Patrick and I, just one-on-one, and we'll get that going.
Okay, cool. We can skip that. 3.10 cherry picks. I think hopefully this is merged by now. Yes, it is. So we can mark this as green. Bugs that need attention. There's the entry CSI plugin leaking gRPC connections, and a couple that were assigned to Shabeksha. Does somebody want to reach out to Shabeksha and see if there's an update on these? Let me just ping her on this document. Okay, I'll make a note to ping her. Then you've got the entry CSI gRPC connection stuff. Is this all merged?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So
the PR is merged.
We're good there, and I think I saw the cherry picks come through for this as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark that as green. And then external attacher, we've got issue number 54.
That's a new issue was reported by Chris recently.
Okay.
So I mean, it should be fairly. It is a fairly simple fix.
Okay.
All right, I'll review it.
Okay, thank you.
Oops. Undo. All right.
There's also a PR under external, I think, provisioner that there's some discussion on what we could look into later. Not today, another day.
All right, we'll skip that for today. And then tasks for 1.11. So the big ones, block alpha support. Vlad was able to get it in. I think I have some concerns about how the teardown logic there happens. But I think the fact is that we don't have any driver to actually test this with, which makes it challenging to write this code. So I think what Vlad is planning to do is basically get some driver where we can actually test the block support and then revise any issues that we discover with this as we discover them. So good thing news is that the core code is there.
You can't use the mock one. You need actual physical things to happen on the system to determine.
Vlad?
The mock one, I could look into it. That's the best I can. Well,
yeah, it's because, go ahead.
No, what I was going to add is because the only thing that the driver receives is a type that marks it as block. So I would have to figure out what needs to happen in the driver itself to drive a block device.
That said, we marked this feature as alpha, and it's gated. It's gated behind an alpha feature gate.
Okay.
So it's not enabled by default. If you want to play around with it, you'll have to enable it first.
Yep.
And kubelet device plugin stuff is all merged. Thank you to Sergey for that. And then, of course, the driver registration stuff came along with it, and that is also merged. So we're looking good there. Both of these are also gated behind an alpha flag. So if you want to play with those, you'll have to enable them manually. Yeah.
Could we create a task to make sure that we have a documentation page of all the alpha flags?
Yes. So we have a update internal documentation for 1.11. Do you want to capture that underneath there?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, one of the prerequisites to get my PR was to create a documentation for the feature. So I added that. I mentioned the flag in there too.
Excellent, thank you.
Block and driver registration. Cool. And then Kubernetes CSI implementation of topology. We are going to scratch that from this quarter. I think Cheng is going to come to this group and present a design that he has, and then we'll implement that next quarter. Next up is updating documentation. Hopefully Luis can get to that soon. And then Sergey is, David has worked on updating the Kubernetes internal to pick up 0.3. I am not sure if it merged. I saw his PR come through yesterday. It was pretty straightforward. And then now we have tasks to update the sidecar containers for 0.3 as well as the CSI drivers. Anybody interested in working on that? We can break the drivers one up into multiple.
And we also need what do you mean by CSI drivers?
Basically modify the CSI drivers to pick up the 0.3 version and implement it.
But which CSI driver? Because why do we track that here? That's what I mean.
Out, honestly. Yeah. So let's say
host path maybe? Host path has no snapshots or topology.
Correct. That's true. So that one is probably GCEPD. I'll assign that to David.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, should that be tracked here? I don't.
You're right. Actually, we probably don't need to track the other one. So like host path is probably already green.
Yeah.
But I mean, we should update the library still. So it's going to be a very simple update.
Yeah, the only thing I think we should track is CSI sanity needs to be 0.3 capable.
Okay.
And its mock driver needs to have like all this, snapshot features and stuff like that. So that's not trivial work. That'll take a few weeks.
Okay. Release. Yep. Any other driver that we want to get updated to make sure that we're picking up the latest library? Flex, NFS, iSCSI.
Again, that's the community. I don't know. Are we the owners of that?
I think the problem is that for those, we are the owners for it. I don't know who else is owning it.
Okay. I still need to create the repos for that. Let me this next week the end of this week I'll talk to Patrick. We'll try to get those repos ready.
Okay, sounds good. All right, I'm getting kicked out of this room. Let me. I think that's pretty much all I have today. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I'm all set.
No, we'll talk later today.
Okay, sounds good.
Just a quick note, Luis. There is a PR in the documentation repo from Jordan. He updated, the storage class with the secrets. So if you could review it and see if something needs to be changed, please.
Got it. Thank you for pointing that out.
Thanks.
In the meantime, is anybody interested in working on updating the sidecar containers to 0.3?
Let's discuss that later because I think that's a good discussion right there. What we need to do. So.
Cool. All right, that's all I have today. Take care, everyone.
All right, later.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.